I don't know how it was for you, but like when I was going
Yeah.
through school and stuff, like in my younger years, like around the times like AC1 to Revelations, etc., were like all releasing, Assassin's Creed was fucking enormous whenever I would sit with all the gamers at lunch.
Yeah.
Everybody would play Assassin's Creed. Everybody would buy them every year. It was insane. And then as it started to conform a little bit more, as it started to be a little more generic, I could see people's willingness to forgive the jank and like the inconsistencies drop. And then
Yeah.
those people that I would sit with, they just stopped buying and playing Assassin's Creed. They couldn't care anymore. And I
Yeah. I
really
mean,
wonder how
that's
much of that like fall off is born from that. Like this idea that players were willing to forgive the rough edges when it was being itself and it was being unique, and
yeah.
then when it both sanded off some of the roughness but not all of it, and then it started to become less unique, well then it was harder to forgive because then you could just have a better experience and
Yeah, you could have more or less the same experience, but better in another game.
yeah,
And it would probably be less painful because you aren't as attached.
exactly, yeah, that's exactly it.
The more these games get sort of literally economized, I mean, rather monetized, you lose this cohesive sense of like interlocking smaller economies of advantage and mechanics and risk and cost benefits that you get in these older games that's totalized so well through the social stealth. Say what you will about the balancing, right? I mean, that is the actual like economics of it, right?
Yeah,
Because it sucks.
it's why these modern mods are becoming like so
Yeah,
popular, because they kind of address that like laxness.
say what you will about that. It's an element that you just, the way Assassin's Creed does it, classic Assassin's Creed, the way it totalizes all of these interlinking loops. It's just you can't get it anywhere else. You can't even get it in this series anymore.
Yeah, we laugh about that constantly, but it's true. So, this is a topic that typically comes earlier in these talks. What are some other games that you love that you don't mention as much? Because obviously, we both love Assassin's Creed. I think it's apparent to anyone just by listening to the conversation we've had up to now. Do you want to mention a little bit about other games you're passionate about or enjoy that you maybe, don't talk about on your channel so much?
Well, I think you'd probably be happy to know this. Recently, I've been playing through the Prince of Persia games. So
Oh,
I
very
just beat,
nice.
yeah, I just beat Warrior Within like very
Nice.
recently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard, isn't it? Like Warrior Within is genuinely like quite a difficult game.
Yeah, like I started it out on like hard. My first playthrough, I'm like, I have to turn this down a notch.
Yeah, like it's really
You
hard.
know? Yeah, it's like actually like, wait, this game's difficult?
That's why how many people ask me like, I have the Sands of Time no damage no upgrades run, and I have like the
Yeah.
Two Thrones no damage no upgrades run. People are like, "Yo, where's Warrior Within?" And I'm just like, the answer to this may surprise you. Warrior Within is
Yeah.
really hard. Like,
Yeah. Like I mean Warrior Within actually kind of goes into like the way it handles its combat actually specifically goes into like the way I was talking about and the way all these different mechanics are sort of balanced and integrated into each other,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So like for example, the whole system of like there's constant trade-offs between a single weapon and dual wielding, and
yes,
your secondary weapon expires after a few hits.
yes,
So the game encourages you to play in the most fun way possible,
yep,
which is that you are constantly moving around, switching between these different acrobatic move sets,
yes.
right? And constantly changing and throwing weapons, and it's like it's cool. It's really well
Yeah,
designed.
like if you kill an enemy and they drop their weapon, this creates a dynamic objective for you to like control,
Yeah,
right? And then like control entails like keeping enemies off of it so they don't hit you when you go to pick it up, right? Like same thing, like having access to walls is power. Like you want to
yeah,
control that space. Having access to like a pillar so that you can do like a blade whirl or like a spin slash, like that, you want to control that space, right? Like the way it works is so unique and so interesting. Like I the game has a lot of jank, especially if you play it on PC. Like I've been
yeah.
emulating it on PS2, and that's a way better experience.
Yeah, I just played the PC version and it was jank, but I still
Yeah,
really loved it.
yeah, same. I mean, it's a really special game. But I just keep thinking about like even simple things like, you know, if you don't have a weapon in your hand, you can grab people, if you grab people, you can remove their actions for a short time by throwing them on the ground, or if there's an edge nearby, you can just kill them. Right?
Yeah.
Like it's these little things like that that are so special and important. And of course, like some enemies can't be grabbed, right? Like if you try, they'll just like warp away from you and like hit you, right? Or
Yeah.
just it's just such a fascinating, like, especially because you played Ninja Gaiden recently, right?
Yeah.
Like some of the ways Warrior Within is willing to piss you off are like, you know, conceptually similar to the ways Ninja Gaiden Black is willing to piss you off.
Yeah.
Obviously,
I
Ninja
agree.
Gaiden is a much
Yeah.
tighter game, but
Yes.
you can see the ideas are there, and I think that's really cool. But
Yeah.
what you were saying about, the way you interact with movement, the way you interact with combat, like, and your time powers as well, like it all fits together, like
Yeah.
combat and
They
parkour are
integrate into each
interlinked.
other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's a game where you're fighting multiple combatants, sometimes you want to like slow time in order to like get to certain terrain, right? Sometimes you want to knock people down with your like knockdown power in order to either, get a weapon or deny their actions or again reach certain terrain, right? Sometimes you don't even have to fight people. You can just leave because
Yeah.
you're a fucking parkour ninja.
It's just unapologetically fun, I think. I don't know. It's like it's hard for me to really say anything else. I mean, I see playing these games obviously forces me to recontextualize Assassin's Creed a little bit because it's like you see so much of the DNA.
Oh yeah. It
It's
came
like
from
especially in the way AC1 presents its story. It's like I was playing Sands of Time. I'm like, yeah,
like you can tell this was made by the
so
same guy. Like
yeah, because the way they present their stories are so similar. There's such an emphasis on like diegetic storytelling. The game and the story contextualize each other.
it's a game that is aware that it's a story in a way that is very compelling.
One of the really cool things is just like, the game acknowledges the fact that you see the future in the save points.
It's so cool. And then like what's really awesome is when you get to later save points, you start to see like ways of dying. And the first time that happens, it's such a like scary moment because it's like, whoa, does that mean that like I'm gonna die? Well, yes, like if you fail like that, yes, it does. But it lets you like avoid your fate, and it feels so haunting inside because it's like I'm changing events in ways that I'm not meant to. Right? Like I was supposed to die like so many times, and then of course when Warrior Within begins, what is the basis of the story? You were supposed to die. The timeline is like gonna do its damnedest to make sure that happens.
The way these games present their stories, it's just I can see the DNA. Yeah, really fun. I have to get through Two Thrones next time, which I mean, I think even more AC1 coded.
Yes, yes. Two Thrones is, I think there's an argument to be made that Two Thrones is my favorite Prince of Persia game. And I think when you play it, you will probably understand why, because like it has so much Lioke energy.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
It's to this day, it's one of my favorite videos I've ever done. The Two Thrones No Damage run with commentary.
Yeah, I remember watching that. That was really fun.
I'm glad. Yeah, it's one of those videos I look back on and I'm like, yeah, I did a good job here. Other than that, I mean, you're not gonna escape me. I know you like Dark Souls. One of the things I really like about you and conversations that I've had with you is that you're one of the few people I've spoken to that actually has brought up the narrative side of Souls. Like a lot of the time when I talk about these games, it's very mechanical. It's very like I too have developed a way of thinking about them, like on a gameplay level, which I call the adventurer's mindset. I've brought it up a billion times. It's basically playing like a rogue, but I just call it the adventurer's mindset because it's more universal. You can play that way if you're a caster or a warrior or whatever. And in fact, oftentimes when I reach the end of one of these games, I have a greatsword and I have a club and I have a staff and I have a bow and I use all of them, right? So like
Yes.
it's just
It's how the game's meant to be played.
I think so too.
You're meant to take advantage of all these different tools to solve these encounters, which are designed like puzzles.
Yes, yes, and I think that part of the whole thing with some players find an encounter that is countering or discouraging their existing playstyle, and then they can get a little frustrated. But I think that is healthy for the game because it pushes you into like enjoying and using these other tools, and then like learning that these are strong in these situations. It's like the Ninja Gaiden example. It's like the JRPG example where like
It's the foundation of good game design.
the first time you discover that like clubs fuck up skeletons, like now you know not to like stab skeletons. Whenever you meet armored or stone or skeletal enemies later, it's like, okay, maybe a mace is like better on these, and it's like, yeah, of course it is. Like,
Yeah, I do quite love the Souls games.
yeah, I think you are one of the very few people that understands what I mean when I say like I love Dark Souls 3's story and like the things
Yeah.
that it says and the things that it does. When I talk about Dark Souls 3, it really gives me the same vibes and the same feelings as like people that are mad that you are doing Altair's day job in AC1. It's like I get a lot of that same energy from people who are mad that Dark Souls 3 is like, well, it's just aping Dark Souls 1 and 2 again, and it's like, brother, the world is fucking melting. Okay?
Yeah. In aping those games, it's actually like doing something really weird, which is that its entire story is just like the world is cannibalizing itself.
Yes, including time and space.
Pretty disturbing, actually.
It
Like,
is really disturbing. Like it warps these old heroes and figures that like you not only recognize from reading lore and item descriptions, you fought them 2 games ago. And you
yeah,
you fight them here and it's wrong. Like it's sinister and wrong and disturbing, right? And then there's
yeah,
something also like really uplifting about this idea of like you're completely worthless. You couldn't do the one thing you were supposed to do correctly. And yet at the very end when you fight Soul of Cinder, it fights you with it like symbolically what the fight is intended to be. It's, previous people who have linked the flame, and thus it's
yeah,
fighting you using different archetypes of Souls player. So like it fights you as a caster, it fights you as a ranger, it fights you as a warrior, and you, worthless Ash, are still kicking its ass until it finally like surfaces Gwyn to the front. And then even
yeah.
he is not enough. Like, how is that like, I'm sorry, I'm just not immune to hype moments in Aura, like
I'm not either, honestly. I think it's really hyped too. Uh, but I think what Dark Souls 3 does so well is it takes familiarity and then it twists it in such a way to communicate something deeply alien and unsettling.
yeah, yeah.
Like that's like I mean I talked about aesthetic tension before. I mean that's three's whole thing. People like to talk about, oh well, this game is just like pure fan service reference,
No,
blah
it's
blah
it's
blah.
almost the opposite.
It's
It's like
not.
fan
Yeah,
disservice. Like
yeah.
Dark Souls 3 is like, "Oh, you loved these games?" Like, well, guess
Well,
what?
now it's like they're being contorted together into a horrific amalgamation of like, and all these completely wrong ways,
Yeah, it's
you
it's
know.
it's like screaming at you like this world is tired. Like, please, like let the natural cycle go on. When I play DS3, when I talk about DS3 and I see people do the Link the Fire ending in that game, it's literally the same feeling to me as like, "Oh, the Templars were right." And it's like, "No. You're not supposed to do that." Like everything in it is screaming at you not to do that. Like,
The Link the Fire ending is interesting in the sense that it shows you that you can't even continue to unnaturally prolong
yes,
the
even
world's
that
ending
has become
anymore.
untenable. It's
Yeah.
so weak and like a flicker at best.
To be honest, I think the game's post-apocalypse visuals honestly are at their zenith in the Ringed City. Like I think
Yes.
to me it's like it's so far in the future where it's like you see how the world has like really fully contorted itself. What's implied in the base game is now like fully in the forefront.
Because you're able to see it, it acts as like such a warning where it's like, hey, if you still don't get it by now, this is what you're condoning, essentially, and what you're like ushering in if you keep like burning the world, essentially.
Yeah.
And what's kind of crazy is the moment you realize like that's not sand that existence is covered in, it's ash. Like all
Yeah.
of it is ash.
The first flame like literally consuming the world for firewood.
God, what a just amazing concept taken to its extreme.
Yeah. No, I think conceptually Dark Souls 3 is really cool.
Yeah. It's also just a comfy game. It's one of my comfy games.
For me, like unfortunately I have kind of soured on it a little bit in my recent replay. So I
Mm-hmm.
played it like 4 times, and I think this was like my fifth time. But for me, I think it's just like because in terms of like the way it's designed, it's like probably the most straightforward one. To
It
me, it's
is,
like
yeah. It doesn't have that
to me
much
it
to
kind of like.
surprise.
But then again, I played it like a million times. That's my problem. I think what it tries to do and what it communicates, and the emotions and the ideas associated with that, the narrative of Dark Souls 3 is genuinely really cool and interesting.
Just perceive it for what it is and what it's doing, and you realize like there's not a lot of things that are willing to like take it that far, as it were.
We need to actually respect the game on its own merits, using itself as the standard of analysis.
People have a
Right? Like, what does
really
Dark Souls
hard
3
time.
try to do?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
people have a hard time with that.
And
They can't
especially,
shake off these expectations that they have about what Dark Souls should be.
yeah, I think with that series in particular, like, and you see it with every game, like, it's so fascinating to me. Like, every game is used as like a cudgel against every other game. It's like, all of these are bad because they're not Sekiro, right? Like, all of these are bad because they're not Dark Souls 1, right? Like, all of these are bad because, they're not DS3.
Yeah,
Obviously, that opinion has like gotten like less prevalent, but like, same thing, like
yeah.
Elden Ring is bad for X or Y reason, and it's like, okay, that may be true, but like
I feel that with Dark Souls 2 because it might be my favorite.
my whole framework, like the adventurer's mindset, where like you fight according to like every advantage available. When I played Dark Souls 2, I was so charmed by the game because it felt like one of the only times in the entire series when the game's world actually had a response to my playstyle. Because Dark Souls 2 is so, and I mean this in a positive slash affectionate way, Dark Souls 2 is so unfair. Like, the game almost needs to do that in order to, like, stand up to my playstyle, right? And, like, I found myself falling in love with it for that reason. I was like, wow, that's really cute, actually.
Oh yeah, I'm the same way. It's like I find all this weird experimental stuff that it does to be so interesting.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is just like, Dark Souls 2 designs itself in terms of like, these really interesting like puzzles.
It feels like those
Basically,
old
yeah.
RPGs that, like, they didn't give a fuck about you.
Like, I mean, even its most infamous ganks, they are designed like puzzles. There is like a solution in the environment that you can take advantage of. I mean, there's this one infamous room in Broom Tower, right, where you have like
Ah, yes.
all the hollow soldiers and like the big lava guy, and you have to open a door, right? And obviously, no
Yeah.
hyper armor.
And you can, like, kite
But
them
it's
around and, like, jump in the hole and then, like, climb back up, right? Like, it's
yeah,
cool.
but it's the solution isn't even that. It's like you chase the barrel guys down into the lower level where all the enemies are. You go around, you use a fire damage attack to blow up these barrels blocking a door. Then you can actually go into it and use it as a vantage point to shoot the barrel guys when they're next to the enemies.
Yes. So
And
cool.
it's like that's how it's like and there are like other solutions too. Like you can wear like high poise armor or like use iron flesh to just use the lever and then go. You're not supposed to like face tank this entire gank. There's like it's a puzzle.
It wants you to play it like an RPG. Dark Souls 2 is maybe like the number one game in the series where it will not forgive you for failing to take stock of your inventory. Basically.
Yes.
Like, you need to use what's in your backpack or you die. And people
Yeah, and
don't
it's
like
cool.
that.
I really like it. I love it.
Yeah, I love it too.
It's so weird, but it's so interesting. It's so itself.
Like, my favorite situations in these games are like when they make me go through a poison swamp, or when like they give me 3 fire bombs and then I'm stepping on some flooring and it breaks underneath me, and now I have to like use my fire bombs to like blow open a path through like 4 guys so that I can escape, right? Like, I love those moments.
Yeah, and Dark Souls 2 is really good at those moments, I think.
Yep, I remember even, what was it called? Dead Man's Wharf? Is that the location name?
Yes, or No Man's Worth.
No Man's Wharf, yeah, where like
Yeah.
you find like a fire sword on a corpse that's already like a little bit upgraded and already fire aspected. And then like those guys there, like they don't like being hit by fire, right? So it's like one of those situations where like, yeah, that's an RPG moment.
These games are at their best when they're designed in this particular way, where they're puzzles that force you to come up with creative solutions.
Yeah.
For me, the reason why I soured on Dark Souls 3 a little bit is it's not anything narrative, it's just kind of the gameplay.
Yeah, they
Where
don't really
it's
have
like,
so much of that in that game.
yeah, you're just kind of expected to. The game emphasizes more its combat than anything else. Dark Souls 3 is less of an adventure game and more of an action game. 1 and 2 are 100% adventure games with like action elements. So it's like, if you have like a really tough gank in 1 or 2, generally speaking, there are elements in place that you can take advantage of to mitigate how hard they are. In 3, you just have to get good.
Kind of. I think three buckles really hard to adventurer's mindset playstyle if you use a bow. Like
Yeah,
if you play 3 as a ranger, that game just fucking explodes. Like it cannot
that is
handle it
true.
whatsoever. And I think like it tries to
I
do a
just,
lot
I'm
of
sorry. I mauled about the thrall ganks
yeah, yeah.
in the cathedral.
I that is exactly the situation I was thinking of when I was talking. You know, it's
Yeah,
I knew it. Like we all know that that's what it is. But yeah, like
yeah,
that area specifically is so like going like okay, if you ever replay the game, play
yeah,
that location specifically with a bow. And
yeah.
just like
Good
go in
idea.
and like look around and like see if you can like shoot down or like snipe down people like hanging on like a wall or whatever, and then like you fight on your terms, like you create your situation. That shit goes crazy. I think
Yeah,
DS3 after Bloodborne is fascinating because obviously like Bloodborne came first,
yeah. And
and then
Dark Souls 3 adapts so much from Bloodborne
yeah, and
in
it
terms
like
of design.
yeah, so like the more action gamey vibe like definitely comes from that. I've been emulating
Yeah,
Bloodborne on PC recently,
nice.
and it strikes me how like elegant that game is. The adventurer's mindset vibe is still really strong in Bloodborne. In fact, it may be one of the strongest in it, despite the fact that it's such an action game, and it's because you can die so easily in Bloodborne. It feels like damage is tuned so harshly against the player in that
Yeah,
game compared to like so many of the others, and also enemy density in Bloodborne astoundingly high across like every area. You really need to like fight as unfairly as possible, and I think someone at From really loved that idea because they would
yeah,
go on to make Sekiro, where like you
yeah.
want to fight as unfairly as possible in that game too, and they push it so hard that they don't even let you level up, where it's like no, you will exploit your inventory or we will just kill you, right?
Yeah.
Like
When games are designed around trying to find creative solutions to, an overwhelming obstacle. I think it's the mark of a good game when, there are multiple interesting solutions. I mean, not necessarily. For something like Ninja Gaiden, for example, like the solution is get good, but you have like a lot of other options, like switching to a different weapon that might be better in the scenario.
yeah, yeah.
I think a lot of games, I think it's the mark of like a really excellent game when they present you with a difficult challenge, but also a lot of options to overcome them.
Yeah, like they
You know?
present you with some level of ownership over how you're going to succeed. Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. Recently, you know, there have been conversations online about they've been bubbling up more and more recently, but just this idea of like the artistic merits of games, like the merits of games as a medium. Sometimes, every once in a while, there are people who say things like, "Oh, like games can be hard or whatever, or they can be like mechanically crunchy, but like only in service of a story." Some people will push back on that, you know, saying the thing that I agree with and the position that I take. What about shit like Tetris? What
Yeah.
about shit like really like tightly designed shmups? When you play that, you're not experiencing a story written with pen on paper, words and dialogue and all that. You are experiencing a story of your own. That also has merit. A game can tell a story like a TV show or a book can, but a book or a TV show cannot have gameplay,
Exactly.
right? And so like
It's like,
why do we deride the aspect of games sometimes that makes them special? You know, like should we not celebrate that? And I have no issues, like I mean I just gassed up a visual novel. It's literally maybe the best thing I played all year in 2025, The House in Fata Morgana. The extent of its gameplay is you can make a decision every once in a while, and you can in fact kill yourself if you're stupid. They have save slots for a reason. But even so, like you're not like pressing buttons and like killing shit with a sword or like shooting enemies all day long, right? Like that's not that kind of experience. And I love that. So I have no issues like praising and giving props to, you know, very narrative heavy games in a traditional way. In fact, I even sometimes cherish games who recognize, hey, you know, we can't make gameplay good, you know, engaging or give the experience we want, so we simply don't have gameplay, right? Like that's why visual novels can be so strong, is because imagine if you had like the most awkward like dog shit gameplay shoehorned into like a visual novel. You're playing the gameplay parts and you're just hating your life. You go back to the story parts and you're having a good time. The right thing to do there is to just not do what you're bad at and just accept and be honest and be sincere. We're just going to do the parts that we're good at. And that's why I give props to visual novels and respect them, because sometimes like gameplay is not strictly necessary for your purposes. But by the same measure, like why does every game need to be like this Oscar bait like award-winning narrative, right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes
No, yeah, 100%.
sometimes you can just press buttons real good and it feels amazing.
Kind of an example of that is Ninja Gaiden Black. That game's story is like kind of there. The story that's most interesting is the personal journey you go on to
Yes.
get good at the game and the way that it trains you constantly. You know, the sense of climax that you get from some of the encounters and encounter designs in this game is just like incredible. It's like better than anything in the story, and more satisfying than a lot of stories that try to take themselves in a more cinematic, serious direction as stories, right? Aping TV. Ninja Gaiden takes advantage of the fact that it's an interactive medium and like it makes itself sort of satisfying in like this narrative way, but not from in-universe perspective of like verisimilitude, right? It's not about what's actually going on in the universe itself. It's about what the player's doing. There's a mechanical story in terms of how the player is improving, and that's where it really excels, and that's what makes it awesome. But I imagine it's like you mentioned Shmups. It's like they're the same way.
Yeah, Shmups, I think I really love your framework of games that have good economics because Shmups are that to a T. When you first start playing Shmups, you play very defensively, right? You maybe stay near the bottom of the screen, like the bottom middle, right? Because that is roughly where you have the most space to move, it's where you feel safest. As you play, and you get better, you become more willing to take risks. You start trying to shoot down more enemies than merely survive. Then, as you reach the next layer of understanding, you realize that scoring well also gives you extra lives. The risky play becomes actually the less risky play once you get good enough to like not die to like, you know, the basic things that you would initially die to. It pushes you into accidentally playing in very healthy ways, which is by trying to aggressively kill everything, you're controlling the screen better. And because you're controlling the screen better, fewer things are on screen actively shooting at you at any given time, and so you are generating more safety for yourself. And so you start playing in a way that you assume is like the safest and the least risky, but then as you play and you improve, because the economics of the game are so tightly tuned and like bound together, playing in this way that like the game wants me to is actually the safest option available, provided I'm good enough to execute it, right? And I think there's just something so elegant and sublime about that like very few genres do. I think beat 'em ups kind of achieve a similar thing where you're constantly trying to control the screen, you're constantly trying to like clump enemies together and deny them actions.
Yeah, I think that's a really good description. You make me want to go play Shmups now,
It's
actually.
good, yeah. I mean, I recommend Gunvein and Devil Blade Reboot if you want some like easier to get into ones, especially because they're one of the big things with shmups is like the graphics and the sound are like really important because you're going to be playing the same levels over and over and over again, and so you want to be looking at something and listening to something that like you enjoy. I think Devil Blade Reboot and Gunvein both have really cool music and really cool visuals that just like feel amazing, and they're both on Steam, so they're like super easy to access.
I will consider them. You know, there is something to be said about a lot of people like to talk about games purely in the sense of vibe or aesthetics, which I think works in some ways. I think just as much, you know, there needs to be an actual theory of mechanics and systems and the way that they function. I think that's something that's been wholly neglected, having a theory of systems.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously literary analysis is well developed. Literature and theater gets books upon books upon books of like philosophical analysis. The language already exists to analyze narratives and aesthetics, right?
Yeah.
For video games, not really. I mean, it's like that one Clint Hawking blog post that like every video essayist has to like reference about ludonarrative dissonance. Clint Hawking said something, you know, there's a lot of game reviews, there's very little actual game criticism.
Yes.
You know, we still have not developed the critical language for understanding games as games.
Yes. Yes. People latch onto the ludonarrative dissonance quote, but they don't so much bring up that one.
Yeah.
So much more pertinent for me for the most part, because I mean, ludonarrative dissonance is a very like easy thing to understand. Like the value of that phrase being coined is like in the coining. It's like literally just as soon as it exists, people are aware that it exists. And then it's like, oh, okay, like I get it, right? It's that I think is its power and its beauty. Is it's such an instantly transmissible concept.
Very elegant.
But the whole we don't really have like criticism for games. Like, yeah, you see that like all the time. I almost literature, like text, the thing about theater production. I just keep thinking like these things were enjoyed by like the elite at stages in human history. And so they would have a vested interest in like highlighting that and empowering that and encouraging it and putting infrastructure in place to like push for it, basically. The elite love theater. The elite love literature. They consider themselves privileged to enjoy those things. You know, for a lot of human history, like people straight up just couldn't read if you were most of the population, right? But and then same thing with music. You know, music is obviously very enjoyed by all people, but you know, particularly by the elite because they can commission it, they can have it happen on demand, right? Like they can have people play for them live, right? They have the means to do this. Games though, games aren't really like this. You don't really hear about like aristocrats like enjoying video games, not for their artistic merits. The closest thing to it that you see is like fucking oil barons or whatever, just spending billions of dollars on like some trash gacha game, right? Like that is how the elite enjoy video games, which I think has like bleed down and knock-on effects on so much of the industry because it's like, hey, this is how the elite enjoy this quote-unquote art form. Surely that doesn't have negative consequences on the rest of it.
I mean, I'd like to engage with that a little bit because I think you bring up something interesting. Video games are a very new medium historically.
Yeah.
Right. In a similar vein to the camera. I mean, I borrow this from a German philosopher, Walter Benjamin. He kind of has this interesting discussion, kind of in a similar vein to what you said, which is that, you know, different art forms throughout history, such as painting, sculpture, were mediated essentially by hierarchy.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
They were considered elite, and that influenced essentially the means of analysis that we project onto these things.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So essentially what you get in terms of like philosophy of theater, for example, or philosophy of literature for a long time was emphasizing the sublime and the transcendental aspects of it. He called it, well, the term has been corrupted now, but he used this term aura. Right, it has an aura around it, a mystique.
Yes.
Right,
yes.
despite the fact that it's little more than just giving meaning to the labor that people performed to actually create this thing.
And to be clear, like I love that word, by the way, like in its original meaning. Like I know that people love I know that people love to use it as like a meme or whatever, but like when I invoke that word, like I mean it in that way that like fills you with awe, right? Like
yeah, exactly. That's exactly what he means. But he says, you know, kind of what happens is that, you know, we live in this, you know, almost totally desacralized modern age, right?
Yeah.
Everything has a commodity value, right? Everything has been thoroughly demystified. The sacred is up for sale, right? So what happens is a depreciation of the aura of these things, right?
Yeah.
But it's not a bad thing because he says essentially what happens is that it becomes democratized.
Yes,
right?
And video games kind of like started that way.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just getting to that. You know, the camera essentially allows for the instant mechanical reproduction of images, right? In a way that is not possible with painting, that would require, you know, genuine artisanal skill. Democratizes art essentially for the masses. This is where you get mass media. Video games are an interesting case because they kind of start off like this.
Yeah.
You know, they're in this thoroughly modern digital age. What the implications of that are for video games, I think maybe it's something that I have to continue to sort of work out in my head. I feel like ways in which that's really significant.
But I mean, one way that I just recently brought up is like because it's not mediated by hierarchy in that same way, video games criticism is either like less serious or less existent.
Yeah, it has this one knock-on effect that, you know, video games don't have this sort of aura associated with them that painting or sculpture has, right? Because these are sort of the arts of a time in which, you know, they were mediated by this sort of hierarchical transaction of like vision, right?
Yeah. Individual games can, but games as a medium, as like a whole existence, do not.
Cannot. yeah, they can't by their very nature.
Yeah.
They're so specifically desacralized in their way. It's like we acknowledge them as code, as products, as systems, as game design, as game theory.
Yeah, I
Right?
think that's why it's so precious to me and so important to me that like myself and the people I surround myself with like do love games genuinely and do like engage with them as deeply as we are able.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately the takeaway is that, rather than eschewing games as a higher art form, right? Because it came about in this desacralized age, right? Instead, we should be able to use degradation of this kind of higher transcendental aura. We should be able to use actually the materialism of these games, their code, their systems, their design, and instead reconstitute a new theory of critique about games as an art form, rather than trying to apply what already exists for older art forms.
Yeah, that's how we get, games like The Last of Us getting praised for their like less interactive qualities, or it's the conversation you hear constantly where it's like games are always praised for doing things that like non-game media already does. And it's like, why do we need to reach for these things when we can simply, examine and enjoy games for what they are? And so when you say like we should probably develop a new way of seeing and a new theory of mind and a new framework. Yeah, like I think we kind of have to, because otherwise we're just not gonna like.
Yeah, or else, games will always be subordinated, rather, as a medium. We'll just continue having these sort of problems that we've discussed, like with Assassin's Creed. The conceptual framework that we use to analyze these games have failed them, just as much as the games failed themselves.
And it also means that players are unwilling to have higher demands sometimes,
Yeah.
basically. Like, we're very content to let games get away with a kind of mediocrity that I don't think that I think would be more viciously like torn apart if it were present in other mediums, and it is, like it often is. But
Yeah,
that may be, I don't know, that may be a false equivalence, but it just feels that way, so who knows.
my perspective is that, it's okay to, treat games as like simply entertainment in the same way that it's okay to treat a book or a movie or a television series as simply being kind of entertainment. You watch it for fun without much more thought than
Yeah,
that.
yeah, because that's what they
The
are.
problem is when you take that as the standard of analysis for everything.
Yeah, and when that's your end point and like you don't allow
Your
it to be
endpoint.
anything more. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like imagine, us saying, "Oh, well, it's just a video game. It doesn't. It's just a theater production. It doesn't matter. There's no artistic significance to this."
Yeah, that would sound insane to any reasonable person. Like,
For games, it's perfectly acceptable, and I think maybe it does show that there's this sort of conflict in terms of like the studies of aesthetics. It's like this sort of older, more emphasis on the sublime and the transcendental and the vibes and the aesthetics. It just doesn't cut it anymore.
yeah, and it's
We need
something.
to get into the harder technical, mechanical, systemic stuff.
Yeah, it's the reason why, because I've never like agreed with this idea, obviously, that like games are somehow lesser. Like a type of insecurity that I often don't enjoy observing is when people do talk about games in that way, where they're like, oh, like you can tell just by the way they speak, they almost have to like be reserved or not like speak with their full heart because, people are not going to take me seriously, right? Like, because it's not a movie, it's not a book. No, like it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't have to be. I think it's perfectly acceptable and in fact even ideal to just like engage with games as seriously and as sincerely as we want, because if we never do that, then we're never going to reach a world where people do take them seriously.
Exactly. It's telling, I think. I mean, you mentioned like these kinds of like cinematic games that are praised for essentially being dissimilar to video games.
Like, is it just me, or
kind of-
when you see that
No,
praise, like, do you not just see how like there's so much insecurity around it?
Yeah, it's like, why is this our metric for what makes a good game story? Because it's not suited to games as a medium themselves. It doesn't take into account what they do that makes them uniquely suited to tell certain stories that other kinds of mediums can't.
Like, I guess it always feels a little unfair and like drives me a little bit mad because it feels like a concession made to enjoyers of other mediums, when
Yes.
those other mediums would never make those kind of concessions to enjoyers of video games because they don't need to. That insecurity isn't there. And so, like, that insecurity doesn't need to be there for video games either. Like, fuck you, come to us. That's what every other medium demands of you. Why should this be any different?
Part of it, I guess, is, you know, these are like kind of the growing pains of like new mediums. I mean, sort of similar things happened to film and then television until they became established, right?
Yeah,
As
new music genres as
art
well.
forms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then comics,
And then
maybe.
something new comes along at the bottom of the totem pole
Yep.
that they could use to recontextualize themselves as being higher. But I think actually what we need to do instead is to focus on what is lower about these things, which is their materiality.
Yeah.
You know, video games are so unique because it's like the art of them comes from what is material about them as video games.
Yes, like they're
As
always
these economies of benefits and costs and risks. What is actually what is actually a game about them. Video games provide sort of this interesting inflection point because it's like what makes a video game is not like simply the story it tries to express or the idea that it tries to convey, but like the fact that it's a game, it's gameplay, what is material about it. That's something that Assassin's Creed 1, to go back to it, you know, nothing is true, everything is permitted. This phrase is an expression and an acknowledgement that AC1 is emphasizing what is material about it. It's trying to take games and then subvert and deconstruct what a game can be, you know, and what a story in a game can be too.
I think that's really cool because, I mean, again, things like visual novels or like certain RPG Maker games, like they've done things like this like in a different direction, and I think like that's also really valuable. And I think like if we give props to those things and we respect and revere those things for like, you know, that willingness to do that, then I think it's good to do the same for Assassin's Creed as well. But yeah, you know, this topic of like what is a video game, or like what is, you know, what is to be taken as a valid form of video games is a topic that does float around from time to time, and I'm always very careful with it because sometimes people use it as a way to like close themselves off to certain types of experiences. You see this a lot with like, I don't know, like action game Twitter nowadays, right? Like there's a lot of like warfare on action game Twitter where it's like,
Yeah,
you know,
I can imagine what specific game you're talking about.
there's a few of them, but yeah, there's one. There's one. Yeah, there's one in particular. But yeah, there's a lot of these things where it's like, you know, games categorically like should never be like X or Y thing, and it's like, okay, like no, let's not get carried away.
I don't think there's any hard and fast rules for what a game could or should be, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's valuable, you know, in the sense that video games can really be anything, because anything can be gamified in that particular way. It's a problem of method, where it's like we apply these pre-existing categories that, you know, when you break them down, essentially arbitrary, right? They're not real, they're not actual. And then we apply them to a particular thing, and then we leave it there. You know, we don't develop those categories from the thing itself.
Yeah.
Right? We don't judge it by its own merits and then judge it according to everything else. We judge its merits according to everything else.
Yeah, it leads to just so many pitfalls, and
Yeah, it leads to a poisoning of the analysis, I would say.
yeah, for sure. You see it very often.
Yeah, you see it very often with Assassin's Creed.
Yes.
So.
You know, when I was younger, I used to have like animosity for like certain genres and stuff. And then, you know, it's kind of a meme, but it's funny, like as I grow older and experience more things and I play more games, I come to realize that like I didn't hate these things. I just hated like bad versions of these things.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, you know, I love RPGs. I feel like a lot of people that dislike RPGs probably would love RPGs if they played one that, you know, satisfied what they want. Right? Like, and the reason I play the RPGs that I play is because consequence is very strong in this genre. You know, in a turn-based RPG combat system, like every decision you make can kill you or save you, right? In a way that like you don't typically get to the same extent. The reason I love Souls-likes is because the shape of decisions is so organic and nebulous and like foggy, right? Like even like walking 2 steps to the left, like that's a decision, right? Like that could have saved my life. Walking behind a wall and like pulling someone behind it so that like they have no support from their archer. Like I bring this example up all the time. Like that's a decision. What is the gameplay there? Like I haven't attacked. I haven't like used an item or anything. I've literally just walked, right? And yet, like that is sometimes what determines whether you win or die. Shit like that is just endlessly fascinating to me.
What is so interesting about games is that precisely what is actual about them is, I mean, to kind of use this language of the sublime versus the grotesque. I mean, if you look at the way books and movies and television are usually sort of described, it's more than just a book, right? It's this incredible story about blah blah blah. It's conveying this idea. What is actual about this particular art form that is being critiqued is never itself, right? It's never the pages on a book, right?
Right.
It's never the actual. It's never the screen that you're playing the movie on, right?
Yeah,
That'd
it's
be considered grotesque.
it's
right?
interesting that you bring that up because yeah, like now that you mention it, like that is very much the case. Like these other mediums are kind of afforded a level of like we've come to an understanding that like these things are not worth discussing because they've been standardized and universalized to a level where it would have to be like an auteur like art piece in order to do something weird with it. Like if the pages were all black instead of white or whatever, and then you wonder like,
Yeah,
oh,
it has
why
to
did
be
they
like
do that?
House of Leaves, basically.
Yeah, something like that. And that's exceptionally rare. Whereas with video games, like there is not that level of standardization. There is not that level of universalization. Like they can be so different among themselves and each other that like it does bear examining their like granularity and their technicalities.
What is actual about video games is not their, I guess you could say, their aesthetic or sublime content, but it's their, material grotesque content, what they're made of and how they're made,
Yeah.
the labor that goes into them. That's what actually makes a video game a video game. There's a reason why I kind of talk about this theory of games as economics. It's because it's vulgar. If you were to treat a book like that or a movie like that, forget it. It's precisely what makes a game good, when it's economical. So I mean, maybe to me, it's like the absence of a critical language for games. I think maybe the real step would be let's just completely divorce ourselves from all the old stuff, that's not of our era anymore. Instead we need to look at the grotesque and the material and the technical and the mechanical and the systemic, right?
Yeah, I think it's not an
Rather than the
accident.
aesthetic.
I think it's not an accident that so many of like the best like game critique does dig into that shit like with bloody fingers and like genuinely does engage with it and love it loudly.
Maybe that's the critique of our modern era. I don't know. I guess it remains to be seen. Kind of how we discuss games evolves, but also how, I mean, dare I say, maybe the ways in which we discuss games also changes the way we discuss art in general.
One thing that will always stay true for me is like I want to and I think we should always invite and encourage more game critique and criticism in general, like both positive and negative. I think it's great. One thing that people don't do enough is genuinely like talk about shit that they love, right? Which it's not as rewarded to do that, but I think it's really important and it is its own reward, especially if you can find people who you enjoy talking to, etc. Yeah, I just think that's like really really important. I think I would just love to see that happen more because it does feel like a lot of people are unwilling or hesitant or a little bit afraid to do that, to like engage with games in that way. But it's something that I always hold very, very precious. This exchange that you see online where it's like, hey, bro, like it's just not that deep. And then, the answer is to you, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
it is that deep and there's nothing wrong with it being that deep, right? Like enjoy it.
Often too easy in all things to fall back on this notion of, oh well, this is just common sense.
Yeah, but it's
just
not
real. There's no content to that. It's like it's because you're afraid to actually take this thing and really analyze it and really dive into it and then to challenge your own pre-existing notions of experience, right?
Yeah.
That's the key. You're afraid to alienate yourself from yourself. basically. But to analyze something, you have to be willing to do that, you know. The despair comes before the reconciliation.
I always love seeing people talk about games, even if maybe even especially if they're the kind of people who maybe don't do that so much,
Yeah, I think
that
it's interesting.
that are a little bit shy about it, that and then it's so cool also to see those people like get more and more confident and like more expressive as they like play more things and experience more and like be willing to talk about it more. I think there's a kind of pleasure and a kind of enjoyment you can only get from really anything that you love, but like games in particular, because of what they are, that you only unlock by being willing to like examine them like that and think about them like after playing them. Like so many times, some of the most fun times I've had with games are like when I'm done for the day and I'm laying in bed and I'm about to fall asleep and I'm just thinking about like the shit I played that day and like the situations I got in. Like that shit is so cool to me.
And I think also it's important to note that you have to be willing to go beyond your own experience as well.
Yeah, it's
'Cause, I
something
mean,
I try to do a lot. Like, one thing that I even get praise for sometimes is like, hey, Leo, like,
yeah,
you don't hate, like, other types of AC fans, like, what's up with that? And I'm just like, well, of course I don't. Like, they just want to have fun
yeah.
too, Like, and I understand, like, from their perspective, like, the things that they value. They're not the things that I value. And even if I did, some of these games don't pull them off, like, to my standard of quality. But even so, like, I understand why people would love this shit. Like, I don't think it's that hard.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, like I said, it's like I'm not engaged with the newer games because I'm not the audience for them. But I'm okay with them existing because they exist for someone else. It's also just like so many people play these games and they have a particular experience with it that for whatever reason just does not really convey what the game actually is. It's like the amount of like comments I've seen where it's like, oh well, I platinumed like all the games. I don't really have anything else to learn. I know everything about these games. No, you don't.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
You may be satisfied with your level of experience and
Yeah,
learning, but like that's very different than
it's hard to admit.
everyone needs
You
to be an
know,
expert on everything in order to like be
yeah,
valid, basically. But I mean, there are so
right.
many games where like I've played like 15% of and then just like uninstalled and never played it again. I will never finish The Witcher 3.
Yeah,
And that's fine. Like I recognize like why it's good. It's not my kind of good, but I don't think that's like necessarily such a horrible thing. Like I play like a myriad of racing games. I haven't reached credits on most of them, but I love them anyway, And it's just some things like you're not willing to like become an expert in. And I think that
yeah.
needs to be fine. Like that needs to be allowed, Sometimes it's like I had my fun with this. This is enough for me. Right? Like no one should like look down on you for that. Like just everyone has shit that they love and that they are willing to invest in more.
Really, the main thing that we have to watch out for is when we take that and then we make it like this objective standard of analysis.
Right, and then it's like if you go beyond that, then now there's something wrong with you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's very unhealthy. That's how you get those comments where it's like, bro, it's just not that deep. And it's like, how fucking dare you tell me like how much I'm allowed to love something? Like, get out of here.
we do need to have this sort of project of developing, this sort of theory of criticism, but specifically for video games.
I am seeing a little bit of an awareness shift that suggests that, more and more people do desire something like that. Like you are seeing that a bit more online, like these very popular posts going around where it's like, oh, it was contempt for the medium the whole time, right? Or one of the other ones, which is like people are now souring on the "you control the buttons you press" tweet because they're recognizing that like part of the duty of game design is to encourage and incentivize certain behaviors and encourage and incentivize like playing in a way that is most representative of what the experience is trying to be. And then a game that
Exactly.
doesn't do that, there is an argument to be made that that is a game that's failing to be what it is. The fact that I'm seeing more and more of these conversations bubble up when, you would never see this kind of stuff in previous years. I do think people are like waking up a little bit more to this idea that like they're more willing to engage with them. It's just not that deep vibe is kind of like falling away a little bit, which I think is a good sign.
Like I guess to take a page out of the discussion we've been having, people are becoming more aware of the fact that games need to be tight economically.
Yeah.
Right. They need to be tight in terms of their design and balancing.
It's less forgivable
Yeah.
nowadays for a game to like have poor tuning. People are becoming more dissatisfied with this idea of like, oh, well, the game is fun if you play it in a way that it never encourages you to, right?
Yeah,
Which
exactly.
I think is a good thing.
I think it is a good thing. I think we have to really push against this notion of like, you could just choose to play this way, even though you don't have to, but the most interesting and representative way to play should be the best way to play.
I do
Because
think it's
what
not an accident that a
yeah,
lot of the most beloved games that like, remain seared into people's minds like long after
yeah.
they finish them are those games that like don't allow you to play in like a boring or shitty way.
That is what is actual about video games. It's their design, the way that they encourage certain behaviors. It's the way that they gamify the experience. I'm glad that people are more aware of that now, for sure. These are conversations that need to be had if we're kind of advancing discourse about the medium.
Conversations, like, again, I just didn't see that many of like in previous years. Like certainly 5 years ago, like you would not hear about this kind of stuff. Like at the time, like you control the buttons you press was the popular thought, right? Like that was like the popular thought at the time. But now it's it's kind of coming to the forefront where it's like, this is just a way to like abdicate responsibility for like high quality like good design onto the player. And frankly, like it's just not their, it shouldn't be their responsibility. Like sure, giving
Yeah.
players options is lovely and great, right? But like that shouldn't be, it shouldn't be used as an excuse to like not do your job essentially.
Yeah, you're making a video game, not a sandbox, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
We covered a lot of like really cool stuff.
We did, yeah. We went pretty hard.
I don't know if there's anything else we want to touch on. If we do, I'm gonna get a drink of water. But like, what do you think?
Honestly, I feel pretty content. I mean, we went from, just talking about stealth and social stealth and like certain concepts to talking about like a unifying theory of like design and critique. So I'm pretty happy with that actually.
Would you be surprised if I said this is exactly what I expected of a rogues chat with Kinography?
I'm quite happy to hear that actually.
Like
Thank you.
this is what I was hoping for and was what I was expecting. I was like, we're gonna start talking about some kind of easy entry point, like hook point into a conversation. Something we have in common, like obviously Assassin's Creed. But I know that like this guy has a lot of interesting things to say about you know
Yeah, I have takes.
yes, that's a word for it. Yeah, I like your takes. I think they're very interesting. They encouraged me to think about some things that I've both thought about and also not thought about. So I think that was really
Yeah.
cool. I'm really grateful that we got to hang out and chat. I hope people like it.
Yeah.
But
I mean, thank you so much, and also thank you for the compliments. I mean, it's good to engage with you on this because you're someone who loves games as a medium.
yes,
It's not just about like oh this and that and oh well this is fun and this isn't fun. It's like a matter of like how do we actually advance discussion about this? It's like the kind of like philosophical discourse I love engaging in.
yeah. I mean, I
Uh,
I want people to enjoy this medium and to feel enriched by this medium in a way
yeah.
that I have been. And that's really hard to convey and really hard to do, and it does involve a lot of like potentially complex conversations.
Yeah.
But I feel good that I get the chance to have those conversations from time to time.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, this has been a real full circle moment for me. I feel like,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, like, I started off being like, oh, well, these Rogue Academy videos are pretty interesting, and
I'm
down
so
here,
glad now you're here on from Rogue Academy to Rogues Chat.
yeah, there you go.
What a cool path we've been on. Yeah. You
Yeah.
mentioned also at the beginning, White Light briefly, that you kind of like
Yes,
ended up stumbling upon some of his videos. If all goes well, this is a little treat for everybody who has listened all the way up to now. But if all goes well, White Light should be the next guest.
that'd be cool.
So I think that will be really interesting. We'll have very fascinating things to discuss there. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think probably I don't know. I think White Light is pretty solid at, games analysis and games criticism, I would say. So I'm excited for really anything that he kind of comes up with.
Yeah. One of the things
I would happily watch that.
one of the things I really love about White Light, and it's something I also love about, Noah Gervais, is that
Yeah.
they both approach games from like a very personal perspective and a very personal angle, which I think is something that, you know, I'm very like passionate about this. I'm a little bit hardline about it, but like I think that's like the only way to approach games analysis and games criticism. You need that like
Yeah.
personal nature of it.
Yeah, I mean, the best way to go beyond experience is to acknowledge your experience as only your experience. You
Yes.
know,
Yes. And I think that
it's just, there's an Assassin's Creed that exists in of itself, and then there's an Assassin's Creed that exists specifically for your consciousness only.
yeah.
So the problem is then when people take that and then just make it the standard of analysis.
It's a trap that is easy to fall into, and it's a trap that I fall into sometimes as well,
Yeah,
because
me too.
we
Yeah.
can get very passionate about these things, and like we want very specific things out of it, and it's hard to avoid being mired in that, I think, and the whole accepting that there are fans out there who love Odyssey, there are fans out there who love Valhalla or whatever, all those games, and that was kind of like a turning point for me in like understanding that like okay, different people want different things out of these, and my experience is not like the only viable metric by which to observe this.
Yeah, I mean, I think a few years ago, like I would have been kind of like in a similar way where it's like, how do you like this? This is like so diminished. But it's also just like, these games exist in different ways for different people. If people enjoy Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla, Mirage, Shadows, let them. You know, good. I'm glad you like it. It's just the problem is when we destabilize the discussion around these games because of that experience, which can come from any section of the community, right?
Yeah.
The old heads and also the new heads.
Yeah, it's part of the reason why I was so like militantly resistant and hateful to them once upon a time is because they have such a heavy gravity that they distort and warp all discussion around them in like the popular eye. And I think that, it's very hard to like not look at that and be like, yo, like this is damaging something I love, like relax, right? Like and I think, no one can really be blamed for like having that emotional response because it fucking sucks. Like
yeah, no, I was the same way. I mean, I remember for a long time it was like Unity was the devil because of how much its fan base corrupted parkour discussion.
Yes, Unity is still the devil, but for all kinds of reasons. I'm allowed to make that joke. I'm probably the reason most people love that game.
Yes, probably. I mean, it was the reason I actually played it and then got into the rest of the series from it. So
yep,
I can't really talk.
All right, well, thank you once again for being here. I really enjoyed myself. Any closing remarks you want to say?
Well, in terms of closing remarks, I mean, number one, thank you for inviting me. I was quite excited to do this, and this was fun. I mean, we did this for like a solid 3 hours. I mean, this is pretty intense.
That's usually how it goes.
Yeah, but this was really cool. I really enjoyed myself, and these are ideas that I've been kind of developing in my head over the course of like the last few years. So it's good to actually get them.
They were interesting.
Like,
they were interesting to hear about and to respond to.
Oh yeah, for sure. It was interesting to have them be responded to. That's how it's the sort of feedback and dialogue. That's how you get good ideas. But yeah, I also just want to say, kind of on a more broader note, that again, it's a full circle moment for me. I have to really thank the community in general and the community that you spawned. I'm here now because of that.
That's awesome to hear.
So,
I'm really grateful.
Yeah. So to everyone watching, thank you so much. It means a lot to me, even though I haven't really uploaded anything in a while, but it's like this is still important to me. I think kind of the experience of like really getting into games in terms of critique. I mean, I think that's been the most transformative part of this community for me. And I think that'll probably stay with me for quite a long time.
Alrighty, well, thank you once again for coming. To everyone listening, thank you for listening. Appreciate it always. I hope you had a good time. Relevant links and stuff will be in the description and pinned comment. Oh, yeah, so thank you once again. And I'll see you next time.